ladies and gentlemen, let's make one for the world's banksters. The gangsters with all those high-dollar whores. The lawyers. You see, folks, the world has been robbed for so much paper money, shin plaster. Quantitative easing 500, yeah, that's all they know how to do is print money from paper, and then they steal it, and they pass it out to their political cronies first. This is how they're running the United States government incorporated. The Federal Reserve prints up helicopter money, lots of helicopter money, and then they pass it out to all their buddies first. The Federal Reserve member banks, like the Ku Klux Klan, like the Plumbers Union, the barristers, the Barratry Mafia there of the American Bar Association down at your local Federal Reserve Bank. They get the helicopter money first, and then they, of course, pass it out to all their buddies next, so that they can control and run the whole freaking world. Ladies and gentlemen, this particular video is going out to certified forensic loan auditors. My pal, my friend, Andrew Lehman. Now, Mr. Lehman, I want you to know that I've been fighting these government sons of bitches for over 35 years on this bankster gangster shit. You see, Mr. Lehman, down in Houston, Texas, you know where Houston, Texas is, Harris County and old Montgomery County, I found them swindling huge numbers of people in real estate deals back in the 1970s and the 1980s. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I go back to the Mel and Steve Powers Colonial House swindles from HUD. Look that one up, Andrew Lehman. The Colonial House swindles. And then, of course, there was the Sharpstown Rent-A-Bank scandal and the Texas Rent-A-Bank scandal and the I-35 condo swindles. And then everybody remembers the giant banking debacle. They called it the savings and loan scandal to distract you. They didn't want you to trace all these real estate swindles to the gangster banksters. And it's not stopped, Andrew Lehman. And to our mutual little friends over at FHA and HUD and FinCEN and, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, the gang that protects the bankers. That's what Consumer Finance Protection Board's doing. They're whitewashing and covering up. They're obstructing justice for the bankers. And all this laundering of huge amounts of money and churning off huge amounts of central bank notes and all this flipping and daisy chaining of gargantuan amounts of shin plaster. Banknotes. Quantitative easing 500. Helicopter money. Now, you see, Mr. Andrew Lehman, this video is going to the Consumer Finance Protection Board because they're the biggest pack of fraud that's ever been let out of the box. HUD, FHA, FBI, Department of Justice, they're all covering up for the banks. They're protecting the banksters, Andrew Lehman. They've been doing this crap since I started blowing the whistle on them back in the 1980s. Case in point, cause number 198617930. Witham versus Western Banks, Houston, Texas, 334th Judicial District Court, Harris County, Judge Russell T. Lloyd presiding. They came waltzing in that bank case, the FDIC came waltzing in that bank case into the courtroom and said, "Oh, Judge, Western Banks has been declared insolvent by the FDIC." Well, that was a lie right there, because the Western banks declared themselves insolvent. You listening to me, Mr. Lehman? The crooked, swindling gangster banksters at RLG Holdings, Rita Laba Betty Groups, Western banks in Houston, Texas, they declared themselves insolvent, and this is after they robbed the bank and moved all their funds offshore, back to Lebanon and Saudi Arabia and Zurich and Zug, Switzerland, and London. Oh, and their palace there on the French Riviera in Monaco. Because you see something, Mr. Andrew Lehman, the Rita Laba Betty Group are a gang of Saudi Arabian Arabs and Lebanese Arabs and Switzerland and British Arabs from Monaco and the United States. They got vast real estate holdings to this day all over the United States. RLG Holdings. They're bankrupt. They declared themselves insolvent. Now, why did they do that? Because I'd gotten a trial date. We were going to trial. We had a trial date in the 334th there in Houston, Texas against Western banks, and then they came waltzing in and, oh, we're bankrupt. We're insolvent. And then Chase Bank and Charter Bank and a bunch of the big banks by an absorption. The Federal Depositors Insurance Corporation gave them huge amounts of money to buy into the Western banks and absorb them. And then you ought to see the cast of characters in the many following absorptions and many following failures of that Western bank mafia. They got absorbed by bank after bank after bank after bank after bank as the Federal Depositors Insurance Corporation assisted these crooked gangster sons of bitches to launder untold billions. And the FBI and the Department of Justice and FinCEN with FDIC and the courts, they aided and abetted them. You listening to me, Mr. Andrew Lehman? And Consumer Finance Protection Board, you're going to tell to the American people, how is it that all those big crooked banks launder money? Do they do it Western bank style? Do they do it like Silverado? And do they do it like Superior Bank? And do they do it like Taylor, Bean, and Whitaker and DocX? And all these odd little real estate schemes and scams of Bank of America and Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs? And I can name banks all day long. Like J.P. Morgan Chase and Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank, however you want to say it. How are they laundering the money, folks? Donald J. Trump, Christopher Wray, William Barr, my old pal William Barr. How is it that all these giant crooked banks are laundering all this money? Would it be predatory mortgages? High interest rate, high risk, fraudulent, inflated, bogus appraisals, selling property for twice and three times what it's actually worth in their flipping and daisy chaining schemes? Daisy chaining, Andrew Lehman. Churning these financial papers, because that's all paper. It's just computer keystrokes, just like Quantitative Easing 500 and all this massive amounts of helicopter money they keep pouring into the system. Right out of the thin air. They make this crap right out of thin air, Donald J. Trump. You want to talk about it on national television, Donald J. Trump? Bring Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and George Bush Jr. Bring the whole damn pile of them. Eric Schneiderman, Eric Holder. You can bring Loretta Lynch. I don't care who the hell you bring with you, Donald J. Trump. And Mr. Pence, you're in on this too, pal. You're in on this too, Vice President of the United States. The giant American laundry. This is how they're swindling the world. And you can bet your bottom dollar, Andrew Lehman, that the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau and HUD and FHA and FinCEN and a whole bunch of the others, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, we go all day long. Farmers Home Administration, they're covering it up and whitewashing it. It is an inside job. Ask Stephen Pizzo, Mary Fricker, ask, ask anybody you want to ask. Peter Bruton from Houston, Texas, ask the Houston Chronicle, ask ABC News, NBC News, CBS, ask Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Tulsi Gabbard, presidential candidate from Hawaii, chime in here, please. Bernie Sanders, you got anything to say, Bernie? I'll guarantee you one thing, Professor William Black, he knows what's going on here, don't you, Bill? Ladies and gentlemen, the United States has been robbed by the government itself. Our government is rotten and rogue to the core. Now I'm going to put my money, my shin plaster, my bills of credit fiat. Donald Stockman, the director of Ronald Reagan's Office of Management and Budget, Donald Stockman, calls all this shin plaster a bunch of phony, baloney money. And you can ask Elizabeth Warren all you want to about phony, baloney money. And let's see what old Elizabeth Warren's got to say. Donald J. Trump. Now, folks, I got friends all over the world. Germany, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK. Oh, I got some friends in the UK. The Great British Mortgage Deception, the Great British Mortgage Fraud. They're my personal friends. Can you imagine that? A real Witham with friends in the UK. All over this planet, the central gangster banksters have been systematically parasiting off society by engaging in their predatory mortgage practices and all these predatory foreclosure practices. Cause number 2:CV-CV-005 in Greenville, Tennessee, in the federal courts in Greenville, Tennessee. We're proceeding and have blown the whistle on this giant money laundering machine. And it's a giant money laundering machine, like never before seen in human history. I'm sorry for the cough, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot of mold, and we've had quite a bit of rain. Looks like it's going to dry up here a little bit, though. Now, for my friends and family who think that I'm maybe half a bubble off or a couple bricks short of a full load, ask yourself a question. Why has the government had to bail out these giant real estate schemes for trillions? If I'm freaking wrong, why has the government had to bail out every major bank in the world? Several times. And now they're engaged in quantitative easing. 500. Just this freaking week. Just this week. September, let's see, I think it began on September the 17th, 18th, and 19th. Something like that. The Fed, the gangsters, the bankster gangsters, the Federal Reserve, that private gang of outlaw criminals, had to computer keystroke and create out of the thin air over $250 billion to pump up the markets. Quantitative easing 5 is on its way. Now, I don't know about you, but I seriously have to question how it is they make so much money from thin air. Was Donald Stockman the director of Ronald Reagan's Office of Management and Budget? Is he correct? And how about Dylan Radigan? Dylan Radigan knows what's going on here. He's from up in the Adirondacks. He's an old Adirondacker. Come on, Dylan Radigan, why don't you chime in here with, Catherine Austin Fitts. Show me the money, right, Catherine Austin Fitts? Come on. And we can get Linda Miner from the Harris County Attorney's Office, and we can get that debutante of Montgomery County, Texas, Nelda Luce Radabau Blair. She was a big legal analyst for CNN and Ted Turner for a long time from Conroe, Texas. And let's drag old UBS bankster gangster Phil Graham into the conversation. And John Cornyn and Greg Abbott, and we can bring in huge numbers of people from Eric Schneiderman's team, the Financial Fraud Investigation Task Force. What a goddamn joke, Eric Schneiderman. So to my friends and family and my contacts and colleagues all over planet Earth, I've raised some very serious issues in this video, and I expect you to follow up on it. Because, hell, I'm only one guy. And I'm broadcasting from here in the, great Pacific Northwest, right? The Australian outback. Hell, I'm up in the North Pole, operating from the Bat Cave. William Barr, good old William Barr said, oh, man, I'm afraid that they're going to try to kill me because my name's William Barr and I'm the Attorney General of the United States. William Barr, tie them panties tight, dude. Pull them panties right up tight around your ass and you hold on for the road here. And same with you there, Christopher Wray. Oh, wait a minute. Hold the phone. Russia. And, oh, gee, golly whiz, they blew up some Saudi Arabian oil refinery. Be distracted. Oh, God, just don't pay any attention to the gangster banksters behind the green curtains. Don't pay any attention to quantitative easing 500 and all that helicopter money. Ladies and gentlemen, toxic zombie developments. That's where all the TARP money went. Toxic Asset Recovery Program. They bought up the toxic zombie failed real estate development schemes and all the, what do they call that there, speculations. All those real estate speculations and office towers and business parks and malls and airports that go, flop. They flop. Using all this script, bills of credit, bills of exchange, non-specie helicopter quantitative easing, phony baloney money. Donald J. Trump, explain to the world what the hell phony baloney money is. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the genesis. This is the very foundation of the whole scheme. This is why Consumer Finance Protection Board is keeping secrets, HUD is keeping secrets, FBI is keeping secrets, Department of Justice is keeping secrets, the Financial Fraud Investigation Task Force keeping secrets. They're ignoring Freedom of Information Act demands. They don't want to explain any of this, because they're the ones perpetrating it. This giant financial fiasco that's been going on in the United States since the bankruptcy of the United States, during the Civil War and subsequent to the Civil War, and in the early 1900s, and then in the 1920s and the 30s, and then again in the 60s and the 70s, this country's financial